Good afternoon, everybody. Jim Warren with TXAPA. Glad to be here today. This is Everyday Asphalt. We are in a different place right now. You may not be able to know that, but we've got a lot of changes at TXAPA right now. We've had to move our studio for probably about the next year or so. And so we're in a temporary place that's going to be our home for a while. So bear with us as we kind of get things sorted out here. So welcome to Everyday Asphalt. The purpose of this program is to go a little bit deeper in the areas of materials, design, construction, and maintenance. And we post all these programs on our YouTube site. We also post them in an audible format on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts, so you can listen to us as you're cruising on down the road. So welcome, everybody, and we're glad you're here today. The show today is on heavy-duty HPG binder. I know some people have heard it. You may have not have heard of this, but we want to go through it and talk to you a little bit about some things associated with it, and also some of the details that you really need to know about it before you start taking a deep dive in here and what the process is. We want to go through that. We want to talk about design. We want to talk about production, construction, those sort of aspects to make sure that you use this tool properly. It's a great tool. But again, we don't want to use a hammer to cut wood and, vice versa. We want to make sure we use the right tool for the job. So anyway, that's the purpose today. Chuck Fuller's in the house again.
Thank you, Jim.
So Chuck and I don't get to see each other near as much as we used to because Chuck's been running all over the place.
I've been all over the state of Texas.
I've got a new role, and so we'll talk about that more as we kind of get into that.
Absolutely.
A little bit, probably not in this show, but in some future shows. We want to do a full program on what's called the APEX, or the Asphalt Pavement Exchange. Used to be called the Pavement Performance Improvement Program, or APPIP. But we're not going to talk about today. That'll be another show. We've got to get a whole bunch of people in here to talk about that to make sure everybody understands. So, all right. So, what's HPG?
Yeah, so high polymer grade asphalt.
So we start out with a glue.
There we go.
Right? I didn't bring all my glue bottles. This is the one I had here. But the binder is just the glue that holds everything together. Now, my purist will yell at me and say I didn't do this justice. But effectively, if we think about binder as glue, we're gluing that aggregate structure together. And we've got different glues out there.
We do.
And we've got some, your basic glue all the way up to, JB Weld or epoxy type glues, which are super, super strong and will never come apart. And so we have got a variety when we're choosing on a project which binder to use. And there is a procedure. TxDOT has a procedure and shows you how to walk through that, and we will make that available. But one of the things as we got started with this was I had some experience with the HPG binders, called something else in my previous state. But there's some very specifics about this material that we really need to make sure that we're all staying in contact with.
Absolutely.
So what we did is end of last year, beginning of this year, we put together what we're calling HPG binder tips and tricks, and we'll make this available to you. We're going to hopefully put this in the download for the program, but we'll also make sure it's available up on our website, etc. So you can get a copy of that. It's 4 pages long, and what we did is we polled the contractors that have actually worked with this material in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Big thanks to Anderson Columbia, Hunter Industries, Lone Star Asphalt, Madden Contracting, and Texas Materials, because they all weighed in on this, and then we pulled in other feedback
from the states, other states as well. So
So the good news about HPG binders is I am not aware of a single failure in the United States with this product.
Yep.
And we want to make sure we give this its due justice as we start moving down the road. So, any opening thoughts on this?
Yeah. So I'm not a binder expert. I'm Pravat Karki out of Materials and Test is our binder expert.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that I'm here, Jim, is because, like you said, I've been going all over the state. I've been going all over the state with PIQ meetings, and almost every single PIQ meeting, this comes up.
Okay.
All the districts that I've visited so
They've
far,
heard.
they've heard about it,
Yeah.
and they want to try it. All the districts have problem areas.
Sure.
And so, when we start talking about this, this high polymer, Again, we have materials and test at each one of our partners in quality meetings, and we have Travis Patton and Pravat and
Right.
Giselle.
And
They all do a great job,
And they're our resource.
and they are our resources. But I just cringe when I hear somebody say, we just want to do a test section. And I was like, man, you've got to
We
look.
want to do 50 tons.
You got to look at this right here, because we want to be successful, right? We
Yeah.
want to be successful.
Yeah.
And people out there, I mean, whether you work for TxDOT, a city, or a county, or whoever you work for, this material is available. It does work, like Jim says, but we want it to be successful. And the first time that you don't follow some of these these tips, you're gonna have issues. You're gonna have some severe. You can damage your asphalt plant. You can damage your equipment. It can cause damage if you're not paying attention and don't know what you're doing.
Or you just won't get it in the field placed in the way that you
Yep.
want it to give it the chance to succeed. So
And we want to be successful.
we want to be successful
Absolutely,
with it. So,
absolutely.
Again, PG binders are glues, right? Okay. Performance grade, PG stands for performance grade. The first number, say it's a 6422, the 64 is based on the 7-day maximum pavement temperature, and 64 is in degrees centigrade or Celsius. The minus 22 is a minimum pavement temperature. That's another degree. We can adjust those binders based on the environmental conditions. Again, TxDOT's got a manual or a document that goes through
Guides.
that. Even shows a map of Texas of where you're at, where you start at, where your PG grade starts at based on the environment. And then you can adjust based on the volume of traffic, the speed of the traffic, the location of where that material is in the structure, and even whether you're using wrap or not. And that can adjust the high grade. And then the low grade can be adjusted as well as with a couple different parameters. We're not going to go through that today. We want to talk about some more kind of boots on the ground specific things, just to make sure we understand big picture what this stuff is and what you're getting into. We got different grades. We have 6422, and then it goes to a 70. We're going to talk about the high grade predominantly because we're trying to deal with rutting with these products. 64, 70, and 76. Those are our typical high grades that we normally use that are in the book that we see. And when you go, each time you go up a grade, that's 6 degrees centigrade or Celsius differences, you're basically doubling the stiffness of the binder. Not the mix, but the binder. But there are other grades out there. We stop right now pretty much at 76, but there's an 82, and there's also an 88. So the 82s are typically used in airports. Where else?
At the F1 track.
At the racetracks are very commonly used. An 82 type binder. Again, the minus will be dependent on where the location is. And then there's this other one, this 88. Okay, and the binder that we're talking about, the HPG binder defined in TxDOT terms, is an 88 minus 28. So it's a very wide span material, but it's very specific. It has a very high dose of polymer in it, 3 to 4 times what you would normally see. These are in, normally, 1.5 to 2 to 3%. These are 6, 7, and maybe even more percent binders, and they act very, very differently. So we want to kind of go through that. So again, binders, and if you're a district or an engineer and you want to do this, you need, don't just specify this. You need to go through materials and test and make sure that they are the gatekeeper for this material to make sure we're specifying it right, we're doing it right, and everything is being done properly so we don't get ourselves into a bind.
That's right.
Okay,
and
so
that's
again,
going in the right spot.
And we're going in the right spot. So MTD is your next step if you're interested in doing something, and they have this information and other information about how we need to be successful with this, et cetera. So this is broken up into a couple different areas: planning, temperatures, asphalt plant, trucking, the MTV, paver, and compaction and testing. We're not going to go through this line by line, but again, this is available and we can make it available to you. If you're online and if you're driving in your car or you're looking at it on YouTube, we'll make sure it's on our website, or you can always email me at jwarren@texasasphalt.org and just put HPG tips in that and says, hey, please send me a copy. We'll get you a copy of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, we want to make sure everybody has this before So we're using proper engineering and good technique and learning from the jobs that have been built about some of this detail. So planning, okay? I'm going to pick off a couple things in here and then we'll kind of go back and forth. Interstates, limited access, straight runs, okay? This is not a mix that does well in small quantities, okay? This is designed for runs of material. And we'll talk about why in a second. This is not something that's typically or normally available.
Yep.
And not everybody has this. So you want to check with suppliers on ordering and how much lead time they need because they have to make this as a specialty product.
I think we have 4 suppliers now that are on the MPL. That's what Pravat said. A couple of days ago, we were in a PIQ meeting. Pravat said we have 4 on the material supply list. So.
And when they order this material, when a contractor orders this material, he can't just get one transport. Because of how this stuff is made, it's made in a large batch. The contractor's going to have to buy probably 3 to 4 loads of this material, which is a lot of, that's 100 tons of 100 tons of binder.
Of binder.
Of binder.
Yep.
And so when we do trial batches, okay, we want to make sure we've got another place to put the remainder of this material. Now, last summer when they were working on I-30, we did the trial batch. We took some of that extra material and did some other test sections with it, some internal test sections with it, but we want to be able to use material. You can't just dump this.
It has a shelf life, too.
And it has a shelf life.
Yep, it has a shelf life.
Production, this material you've got to communicate. You're not talking to it, but you're talking to the supplier, to the contractor, to the agency, back and forth, because there's some very specifics about shelf life, and that, as Chuck said. We don't want to piecemeal an HPG binder. We talk about some projects where they want to pave this piece and then pave that piece and pave this piece. This is not really designed for that. This is designed for, we're going to start here and we're going to go that direction. Okay, so if you can't do that, and again, this is not designed for bike paths or for parking lots or that. This is designed for heavy duty traffic, slow moving, a lot of trucks, energy sector
static
stuff,
load.
Static loads, that kind of stuff in the right place. Repairs for contractors, man, you need to have some critical spares on stuff that could break because this will stress your equipment, and if you send your crappy equipment out there, it's probably going to break. And so, and then we want to debrief every day. So let's talk about temperatures, okay? This material is very, very viscous. It's very, very sticky. And you're going to hear that probably 28 times today. So we're going to be working at the high range. Okay, binder delivery, going to probably be at that upper range around 350. Storage, you're going to be 350 at a minimum up in that area. Mixed discharge, we probably want to be about 345 to even 350 in that range. We want to be at that high end because this stuff is so viscous, and you don't realize it until you work with it, how quickly this stuff cools off and how stiff it actually gets. Windrow hopper, when we're delivering it to the paver, we need to be about, based on what we've seen in the field, we need to be about that 335 and 340 range in there. So we need to be careful about saying, well, we're going to haul this 200 miles. Probably not going to work very well.
And it cools off just so quick.
And it cools off. And then behind the screed, these are the jobs I've been on. If we're exiting the screed, coming right out underneath the screed, and you're shooting in right there, at least 300 degrees or pretty close to that, generally you're in pretty good shape, and now your rollers have got to be
right on top
of it.
So that means that we need to be looking at this in the summer months and not.
Absolutely.
We need to be doing this when it's in the heat of the summer months, and which is going to limit our paving season.
It does. But again, it's a specific tool.
It's a specific tool for a specific
application.
Yes,
and so I think we need to understand that. And we don't need to be trying to do this in January or with a 1-inch lift. It's not a good idea.
Now, it has been used with multiple different types of materials.
Yes.
Yeah, so we've used it in an SMA, Tom, and a PFC, and in a super pave, right?
And a super pave.
So we've used it in different mixes, and they've all been successful. So, and again, it's because of the fact that we're paying attention. And and the learning curve has already happened.
For those people that have done it, the learning curve has not happened for those people that haven't done it yet. So FYI.
Right.
So let's talk about it at the plant, okay?
Yeah.
One thing about this material is being very viscous. It's going to put strain on the system. So pumps, meters, piping, making sure there's the diameter of the piping is such where this material can flow properly. Strainers, keeping strainers clean. We've got in there, HPG can be 4 times as stiff as a 7622, and some people don't even like make
it 76. Yeah.
So, etc. Storage, you mentioned this earlier.
Right.
And so we're hearing, and this has been from the get-go, this stuff does not have an infinite storage life.
Yeah.
You're typically looking days to maybe a week. And again, you're going to work with your supplier and work with them to figure out how to handle this material.
Yeah.
But we need to be very careful about how to do this. And one of them said it can take 2 to 3 hours to unload a transport.
Yep.
Because the stuff's so viscous. And
Yep.
so we've got to be working through that. So again, this is going to be this tip sheet can be very critical pre-planning for the project. And then I would make you take this to maybe your pre-con and then also your pre-pave, and you go through it again and again to make sure you're gathering the data that's available from people that have already done this. Again, no need to reinvent the wheel, if you will, in the process. So again, storage time, check with your supplier about circulation. You're going to need to calibrate your meter with this material.
Yep.
Just because of the viscosity differences. Got notes on an oversized strainer. You want to check your moistures on your aggregate.
Absolutely.
Because if it rains, we're getting a little rain in here in Central Texas right now, but you may not be running today, and you may not be running tomorrow.
Yeah, that moisture is a huge issue out in the field. I was told that it just does not work well.
Yeah.
After a rain event or light moisture, it just doesn't. It's because it's just so, like you said, it's so hot. Everything is so hot that it just doesn't do well with moisture.
Yeah. So just some it doesn't alleviate us from doing basics, and I wanted to stop here because I wanted to mention one thing when we talked about this last week at a meeting. We talked about HPG came up.
Right.
When we talk about the materials we're being used, and since we're talking about moisture contents, etc., that's what brought it to mind. We want to make sure that you're not just taking an average. Your binder's only 6% of the product.
Right.
So that 94% has got to be a good aggregate structure.
Right.
We can't expect some magic glue to fix a poor mix design.
Right.
Okay, and so we want to make sure that we're properly blending our material, getting good proportions, getting good shape, getting good texture, and getting good packing of that aggregate structure. And then the glue is going to glue everything together and hold it together. And it's also going to be able to resist some of the loading because of the nature of that material. But we've got to have good mix designs. And I've heard some stories about some areas that, even SMAs maybe not performing as well as they want to. Well, I wouldn't just artificially just change the binder out without going back and looking
at the aggregate structure.
And making sure we've got a good structure. We're looking to try to improve things, not replace things.
Right, and you bring up a great point. I mean, we've had multiple conversations. We had just had the level 2
Yeah.
committee in here a couple of days ago, and again, we got some level 2. We got some specialists out there that are really good at this.
Yep.
The conversation came up just in our PIQ meeting in FAR, is that the aggregate structure is so important, and just like you said, just increasing the glue is not necessarily the answer.
Right.
Let's look at that aggregate structure. Let's make sure that we have stone on stone at the SMAs, and make sure that we're doing all the basics. Make sure
all the basics.
All the basics.
All the basics. I had a meeting this morning talking to some contractors, and they said, hey, the way they get their jobs done as well as they do is they focus on the basics.
Yep.
They have mastered those basics, and it shows when you go out and ride their jobs. So,
Right.
All right. So again, rain, moisture. Don't switch mixes when you're running HPG. You're going to run one mix
into one silo.
Because there's some issues with buildup that can occur, and we want to get our production level's a little bit low. We don't want to hot rod the plant. We don't want to push, well, I can make 400 tons an hour. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
And what we're getting generally from the contractors that have been successful with laking this, they're looking 175, 200 tons an hour. So
175
that
tons an hour.
impacts
Absolutely.
everything that you're doing out there. But so steady running wins a race, and don't push to do more. We want to balance trucks, pavers, and rollers. And here's one more time, we're going to mention sticky. High binder contents like PFC and SMA are especially sticky and tough to work with.
Yeah.
So it's
Just
not that
double
we
it.
can't,
Yeah.
but
You just gotta pay
they are
attention.
you know, it's going to be a challenge. Don't store mix more than an hour. Don't try to store it overnight. Use one silo. Gates can stick. We even had one contractor said they're checking their gates throughout the night to make sure there's not a buildup where it's
On the gates.
restricting the movement of those gates.
And that's also upstairs at the batcher.
At the batcher
At the
as
batcher
well.
beam,
Yep.
watch your batchers because
Yep.
again, it could load up. you
Yeah.
know, So
And the thing that you don't want to have happen is something lock up and this mix sit inside the equipment where
Anywhere.
there's moving parts for a long period of time, because once that cools, the horsepower demand may exceed what you
can have.
have.
Absolutely.
And then you're gonna be in a.
We've
then you're
also heard the slat conveyor amps.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
go up.
They go up, and
Yep.
to watch them. And when you, well, we had TJ in here not too long ago, and he says that a plant usually screams.
It cries before it
cries before it dies. So
Yeah.
I mean, if you're having issues now with just regular mixes, you're right that you need to.
That's a good point.
You need to take a look at everything.
Take a look, make sure everything's maintained, everything's up to speed,
Up to speed,
et
ready to
cetera,
go.
before you go any further. Again, ambient temperature right behind the screed, you're kind of looking at in that 300-degree range. Consider maybe an 80 degrees as a minimum. This isn't a spec thing. This is just based on people that have worked with this material and how it handles. Kind of the superintendents are saying, you don't want to get too cold with this. So if you're paving nights, and particularly into the fall, we're in the middle of summer now, but if we're trying to
Yeah.
push something, hey, we just got to get this done.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to have the conversation sort of with that. So trucks.
Yeah.
Okay, so we want to make sure the big takeaways. Make sure trucks are clean. Okay, make sure one company uses a pusher or a person to try to make sure trucks are clean. They're in order and they're properly got release agent in there. There are a couple release agents in this document. I'm not promoting anything, so we're not going to announce them here. But in this document, there are several things that have shown to work
Successfully. Yeah.
successfully.
Yep,
Diesel is not one of them. Former state that I worked in, Florida had a tendency for their very sticky PFCs to use they would put release agent in it, and then they would take a cup or two of dry detergent and put it in the bottom of the truck, and the heat reacting with that would help it not to stick.
Yeah.
So
Good.
just another area. We want to clean the buildup of trucks. Don't let it accumulate between loads.
Yep.
When you're dealing with like a PFC or an SMA with the fibers, things tend to kind of chunk up a little bit.
Yep.
This stuff doesn't unchunk
No.
the way some of the other things do. So if you've got chunks, don't just think you can just run them through the machine. If you've got cold spots or chunks of material,
Pick
just
it up.
pull them out.
And yep.
Just pull them out. You're big on tarps.
Tarps, waterproof tarps
Yep.
are just good tarps. I do know that some of the companies had used belly dumps.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Some of the companies said that they had not
They don't want to use belly
They don't want to
dumps.
use belly
Yeah.
dumps because of the temperature.
Yeah.
Some companies use nothing but insulated trucks. They have some insulated trucks that is helping with the temperatures. But whatever you use, I mean, again, it's the whole thing about keeping everything clean,
Yep.
secure,
Yep.
everything tarped.
Yep.
And again, I can't stress enough, you've said it already a couple of times, but you have to have a balanced production at the asphalt plant and at the paver. You cannot stop.
Right.
Stopping, and I'll show some numbers here about some thermal segregation numbers when we stop, what
Yeah.
happens.
Yep.
And
Yep.
we're just talking a couple of minutes.
Yeah,
And I'll show you some of these
again,
numbers
have
here.
enough trucks. Whole argument of overload. Can you have enough? You could probably have too many at some point, but generally
It's not
having enough trucks is we don't want we want this balance thing working out.
Yep.
We want this balance. Belly dumps, unload half a load to a load at a time. Don't try to do more than that. That's not a good idea. Overlap your windrows. MTVs, okay, the material transfer vehicles. Again, binders, these are very sticky and are tough to work with. When you put hot, sticky binder on cold steel, guess what it's going to do?
It's going to suck it right up.
It's going to stick to it, and it's going to suck the heat out of it.
Yep.
So watch your weather. Cool weather's not best, particularly on thin layers like common PFC. If the shuttle buggy, some of them have like a straight front end with just the augers. Some of them have that
The insert.
funnel.
Yep.
You want to use the funnel. You want to force that material in there. There was a problem early on with one of them, and it just wouldn't grab the material. We want to funnel that material into it to make sure it's doing that. Discharge for the windrow. Into the windrow is in that 335, 345 range, but I've documented it, 30-degree loss between the windrow and the back of the screed. So it stuff cools off fast. Don't allow extended stops with mix in the MTV or the paver, because that stuff starts to cool off and it becomes very, very stiff.
And then you have to get in there and get it out.
And that's not a lot of fun.
And I don't want to be that person.
It creates a very high motor demand. I saw one machine just start to cry, and they ended up having to cool it off and then get it going again, but then everything sat.
Yep.
And they ended up having to push mix off the roadway because the material was too cold. And so this is a high temperature material, again, got to be worked in there. Note in here about using a co-cal or window elevator, making sure there's a lump breaker in there.
On it.
Some use, some don't, but I would turn that thing on and just to make sure if we got any chunks, we're beating them up and breaking them down. Got a note in here on paving on an under seal that make sure they're using some water on the tires to make sure that they're not picking that material up as well. Paving, okay. Now we're ready to pave, okay. One of the contractors said they use cold weather paving techniques.
There you go.
Okay, so they're going to treat this like they're paving this in the winter, not paving this in summer. So everything's tight, everything's balanced, everybody's paying attention, no wasted effort, etc. We're focused, we're concentrating to be successful with this.
That's their SOP for that.
Yeah, that's your SOP for that. And again, high binder contents like PFC and SMA are sticky and tough to work with. Again, we threw that in there. This is important to recognize, folks. Proper paver setup. Now, at texasasphalt.org, if you go to resources, there's a paving checklist in there.
Yeah.
And you can download that and you can run it on your phone like an app. And there's a lot of paver setup ideas in there about making sure your paver set up before you get started in the process. I've seen, and I don't think it's a really good idea, where they don't start setting the paver up till they pull up to the joint.
Yep.
And they've already got mix.
They got mix ready
mixed
to come
down.
in.
If you do that 5 or 10 minutes it takes to do that could cause yourself a lot of problems right out of the gate.
Absolutely.
So we want to make sure when we get to the line, it's like football or scrimmage or whatever. You get to the line, you are ready to go.
Yep.
And don't start working with the mix until the paver is ready
Set
to
up and ready to go.
Paver speed, we're seeing 20 to 30 feet per minute.
And you know why that is? I asked that question. I asked that question to one of the superintendents of why do we have to only go 20 to 30 feet a minute? And of course, because of balance and pavement.
Yeah.
But he said that if we went any faster than that, it tears the mat.
Okay, so it needs a little bit of time just to kind of get into place.
Yeah,
okay.
and he said that if you go too slow, it will raise up on you. If you go too fast, it tears the mat. And so he's again, this is that daily debrief that we talked about.
Yep.
So they were doing hourly debriefs, because they'd never done it before, right? So they were doing hourly debriefs, working with it and saying what is working and what is not.
Okay.
And that's how you got these tips.
Exactly.
That's these individuals have already they've been there.
They've paid the price.
Yeah. So if you haven't done this, please grab these tips and go through them and look at them because, again, that paver speed.
Take them seriously.
I never would have thought that the paver speed of 20 to 30 foot is not on a highway. That's slow pavement on a highway. It's slowing it down. But you're not running more than 180 tons an hour anyway.
So you do the math, it's probably
Yeah.
about where you need to be.
Yep.
And I think one of the things there is we want to try to pave continuously at 20 to 30 feet. We don't want to
That's
go
it.
from 0 to 50 and average 20,
That's right.
because that material is going to react with the screed
Yep.
pretty significantly.
Absolutely.
Like, at really low speeds, screed's going to rise. At high speeds, it may pull and tear. And so we want to just kind of just continuously feed at just, boring old paving, just kind of laying it down. But
Right.
that's going to give us the best quality in the process.
Yep.
If you too slow on trucks waiting, you're going to notice the screed's going to arrive. When you pick up, the screed's going to lay back down. Don't outrun the trucks and let the pavers sit. Sometimes we see this. Again, we want to be paving. We want to set things up and do things very consistently and do that. So this is one thing on an interstate. This is another thing if you're paving in an urban area.
Right.
And that's just so the level of challenge becomes even higher,
Yeah.
and communication even more so.
Yep.
Keep the mix flowing through the MTV and paver continuously. We don't want to be sitting there with a load of this stuff anywhere for any length of time. I don't know what that number is, but it's shorter than you think it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we got up here at the beginning of that with that 5 minutes will create severe segregation, and
Yep.
and we have information on that right here. There was several segregation profiles run during a couple of these projects.
Yeah.
I mean, they were running them every sublot,
Yeah.
but they really noticed that if it's a 5 minute paver stop, 56.9 degrees
Temperature loss.
temperature difference.
Okay.
Across that mat.
All right.
56, that's a 5 minute. When it got to 7 minutes, it was 69.
Okay.
So that's how fast it
Cool.
cools off. And now you're dealing with thermal segregation.
Yeah.
Let alone compaction.
Yeah.
You're going to have thermal segregation issues. So pay attention, use the scanner, do all your best paving practices. If you are using a camera, be continuous with it. Make sure that you're paying attention to that temperature.
Yep.
I just
Good
can't
point.
stress that
Good
enough.
point.
So.
Again, this has a place, and it's a good tool.
Absolutely.
It's not for every place. It's for specific applications, and in those specific applications, we want to start from the beginning, from design, and we want to communicate all the way through construction that this is a special job. I got the chance to go out on the Coda track this year.
Yep.
When they were paving, doing some was that this year? I think it was early this year. It's been a heck of a year. It's only June, and I was watching them pave 4 to 5 pavers wide into a turn, and I was just remarking of how complicated that was for them to do that. Very specialized, very detailed, and kudos to them for doing that. Can I give them a shout out?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, that was ABR.
ABR, Austin Bridge Road.
Austin
Yep.
Bridge and Road. And just tremendous work. But that was a very specialized type of operation. This is not going to have 4 or 5 pavers wide. But the attention to detail, in my estimation, needs to be exactly the same. That focus on quality, that focus on using the material and keeping things moving in that process needs to be the same point in the process.
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
Anyway, so again, we've still got some more stuff to cover, but again, I want to just take a step back for a second and just focus on what this material is. It's a very, very stiff binder, and it has to be heated hot in order to make it work. And we got to understand that. But even heating it hot, it's still going to cool rapidly because of the nature of it. And so, anytime we handle it, anytime we move it, we got to watch about temperature loss. We got to watch about hand work. It does not really like to be hand worked well. I've seen these guys try to push this material around, and they're really having to work. So here again, on the paving, getting the paver set up properly, making sure we're following the rules of how to make sure the paver is set up, and then leaving it alone and not sitting there jacking with it. Those times when we're doing that, I think we find the level of success to be high. So again, it's that attention to detail. Not trying to scare anybody, but I am. But it can work. But we've got to make sure we're doing it we're doing it properly, and that's why we put the schedule, and that's why we're here today.
Yep.
We'll be having another one of these. If you come to our annual, we'll be talking about this again there, just because it's important. So, again, keeping going, minimize truck waiting, joints. We got to build our joints properly, and this stuff is kind of unforgiving. Again, if we're going to take us 20 minutes to rake and mess with the transverse joint, we're not going to have a good joint. Making sure the paver's set up right after the get-go, starting blocks or starting, the starting pads or whatever we're dealing with, making sure we use those properly, and then every day checking the ride. I've seen, if you put a bump or dip in this material, it's not going to roll out. And so we want to make sure in the process that we do that we're doing everything right, and we just got to know that, if you get a problem, you have a problem. And I don't know if anybody's had to come back and try to patch with this material.
Not
I
yet.
don't know if that's going to work well. So let's try to make sure we do it right at the beginning. And if you have to do something, let's have the discussion before you start grinding up 20 foot of it and try to put a patch.
I'm out there in the field, we're going,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden there's an event, say
Yeah.
an accident or what
Yeah.
have you. My traffic queue gets all discombobulated, and I have to stop. And my temperature does drop below that 270 or 260. We know that's about the temperature where it seizes up.
Yeah.
Yep. So
Yep.
what do we do, Jim? I got some material in the shuttle buggy. I got some material in my paver. I'm sitting there, and it's no fault of mine. It's an accident or traffic.
So I'm not getting any more mix.
I'm not getting any more mix. Maybe for another 30 minutes or 40 minutes, and it drops. The temperature drops.
What would I do?
Yeah. What are you going to do?
I would pave out and make a joint.
Make a joint, right? So you're going to pave out the material that you have.
Use that material, and I would not sit on that material. You might be able to do that in the middle of summer on a hot day with a 6422 and give yourself 20, 30 minutes.
Yep.
But all the data that I've seen on this sort of stuff, and correct me if I'm wrong, you don't want to sit on this material.
That's exactly right. So that's what I would do too. I would pull it out, and then I would have a loader or bobcat like you have here.
Yeah.
You have a loader bobcat and a saw. Typically we all have, and then I would go ahead and wait until I had the steady flow of material again. Saw cut that joint, that transverse joint, and just like you're starting a brand new day, and you start all over again. But there's no doubt that that's going to be your best practices. Even with any material, even with the 64 or 70 or 76, if we have an event that's preventing us, from having to continue, it's better to make another construction joint.
Yeah,
It's better
people
to
don't
make
like to hear that.
I know they don't, and it's a lot of work. I get it. It is
but-
work, but it's better to do that than it is to sit there and try to make it happen.
Yep, I agree, and that was one of the points here is have a skid steer or loader available. If the paver has extended stops, the mix is going to cool off, become very stiff, and cause the screed to rise, and can be very severe thermal segregation. Just lift the paver up, push that material off. I've seen that. I've seen it. They sat there, and the MTV was having a heart attack or needed CPR, and they're working on that. And as soon as they started to pave, that screed it didn't rise up a little. It rose up like a couple inches, and everybody, they looked at the super, and super said, just cut it.
Yeah.
And so they lifted up, moved all that material out, resat, and paved on, and then they were good to go. But we don't want to have issues there. So set the screed up right. You have the electronics set up before we hit the joint, before we start. Don't unload mix from the truck into the paver until the paver is completely set up on the joint, ready to go, and everybody's ready to go. We've got everything turned on, everything's set up, everything's
We got
balanced.
water in the rollers.
We got water in the rollers, etc., which is the next issue here. And so, again, we can do this. We can make this happen. But again, the attention to details. Now we're playing, this is the playoffs or the Super Bowl. This is not, the game one of the season. Compaction. Again, we talked about this. Mix cools off pretty quickly, and it's going to be much stiffer than a conventional mix as it cools. Use proper roller setup. Again, look at our paving checklist, texasasphalt.org. Look under resources and look under paving checklist or https://checklist.texasasphalt.org will get you there as well. Seeing a lot of guys, they're running their rollers not like this, but they're running them in echelon. So if they're paving 12 feet, they got 2 half-lane rollers, and they're working together kind of like the Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels. I like that technique, but they're getting in that material, getting it hot, they're getting density, and the numbers that we're seeing is they need to have density by 230 to 250 degrees. That's where some people may be starting.
Yeah,
We need to be done.
we're done about that.
Because again, that material is going to cool off very rapidly, and below that, you can pound on it and beat it, but you'll probably
Not
end
gonna
up
get it.
destroying it.
Yeah.
You can obviously still finish roll cooler.
Yep.
But this stuff rolls, and when it sets up, you're pretty much done with it. It's
So do
pretty-
you use pneumatic rollers on it, or does it depend on the material that we're doing? So
I
like
think it probably depends on the
PFC, we don't use a pneumatic roller
No,
anyway.
I would
and-
not use it.
In
I
Tom
don't-
mixes, we typically don't put any kind of pneumatic on it. So
I don't know if I've seen a rubber tire on
yeah.
this.
So the SMAs, that's a good
Yeah.
deal. Good.
I know some of our guys, they typically like to use a rubber tire, but I don't know if I've seen a rubber tire on this material, just because of, if this binder sticks to steel,
It's gonna
it's
stick to-
really going to stick to rubber. And so maybe if somebody's got some experience in that, but
Yeah.
might want to be careful.
It's
Maybe
the
just
echelon
stay
roller.
with
What
steel.
I've seen is the echelon rollers,
Yeah.
two of the breakdowns,
Yeah.
and then a finish roller.
Yeah.
So that's
When you
what
get
I've
it
seen.
hot, it's going to move. It's not, it's going to compact if you get into that zone. But that zone's pretty tight. I see a lot of folks putting Dawn, and I don't get a cut from Dawn, but Dawn dish soap in the water tanks. It helps, helps fluidize that water, break the surface tension of the water. We've talked about it in the MTVs as well, the MTV tires, et cetera. But a little bit of that soap in there. Don't put a lot where you've got it's shooting out foam. That's probably too much.
Yeah,
but
you got foam
but just
coming.
enough in there just to kind of
Yeah.
help break that down. A lot of guys that know that they already know how to do that. Confined joints need to be pinched. Unconfined joints, generally a little bit of a hangover of that joint, if you know what I'm talking about, just to get some weight on that joint to press it down. End gates down, like we talk about, and everything we talk about. Make sure we're confining that material.
Yeah.
And then let the mix cool before we let loose the traffic. There is a level of zone that we're going to get our density in, but some guys say, hey, you still don't want to cut traffic loose on a really hot mat
Yeah.
because it can actually start again rubber
Rubber sticks to it. Yeah.
to steel. So make sure it gets cool. If you're in an area where you're going to have to run traffic on it, at this point, water truck, dump a bunch of water on it. It'll help
Cool it, yeah.
break down that surface
Mhm.
temperature as well. And then testing, obviously, we're talking lately here about, good samples and representative sampling, using your random numbers, but when you're taking a sample, make sure you've got a representative sample. Make sure it's hot. It's going to stick to your tools. It's going to stick to your shovel. It's going to stick to your pans, etc. Make sure you're working with the material properly.
Yeah.
One of the guys came up with coring. They put dish soap in their water supply, and that helps keep the cores from getting stuck in the core barrel.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that's a heck of an idea. So obviously somebody had some experience with that, probably not a good one.
Yeah.
And so
Having to beat the core out of
probably
out
not
of
good
barrel.
for the core
Probably
either.
not good for the core.
Yeah,
but
either.
So I thought that was a pretty good deal. That's that's
It's
just
a little thing, but
It's a trick.
It's a trick.
of the
It's a
trade.
trick and a tip, and
Yep.
doesn't hurt anything at that point.
Yep.
So, and then just temperature segregation. The mix is going to cool rapidly. Keep the operation moving to minimize segregation. So
That's
there's a lot more in here than what we covered. We just kind of hit some stuff
the high
briefly, and
spots.
I would encourage you guys to maybe read this a couple times.
So a couple of the items that came up in some of my PIQ meetings, and these
Yeah.
are great discussion items, and
Yep.
I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Uh-oh.
Are you ready for it? So, if it's very high stiff binder,
Okay.
doesn't that promote cracking?
No, but and that's a really good point. It's a because you'd say, hey, it's super stiff, right?
Super stiff. It's gonna crack.
Right. But this has got such a high load of polymer in it.
Right.
And again, it's one of those things. It's very stiff, but it's also very flexible, and it doesn't make sense in the bases. But I've got a bar of this stuff in my office that you can take this bar. It's just pure binder. You could turn it into a knot, and you lay it out, and it unwinds itself.
Yeah.
So it's not. It doesn't make it. It makes it rut resistant, but it doesn't make it brittle.
So
Okay.
the elastic recovery
It has
of it,
very high elastic recovery.
Yeah.
I think it's
95.
90% or something like that.
So, and that test, I guess they pull it.
They pull it apart a certain distance, they cut it, they wait, and what happens is you cut this stuff and it just shink like a rubber band.
Yep.
And then they push it back together and they measure how much of it has recovered.
So it's rut resistant and crack resistant
Yep, on
because
both
of the
sides.
fact on both sides. So
sides.
you get the best of both worlds there
Yeah.
typically.
Yeah,
So
and it's a specific. It's in 300. I think there's a special.
there is.
For this material, and it's specific. And you're not going to go bumping or changing the high and the low grade on this stuff. It is a binder by itself.
By itself.
Has certain parameters it's got to meet. Regardless of where you would use it, from FAR to
Yeah.
Amarillo,
Yeah.
you would use, if it calls for HPG, it meets the same requirement. It will meet the requirements for
Yeah.
temperature and loading in both places.
So we have
in that area.
we have 4 suppliers, is what
Yep.
Pravat said
Okay.
the other day,
Okay.
that have proven that they can
Right.
produce this
Right.
material.
Right.
So make sure that you're dealing with a good supplier.
You need to ask.
You
Yep.
need to ask, and then I would also involve materials and tests in terms of testing this material,
Absolutely.
so that we make sure that because there are different processes of making this material. There's different processes of making
Yep.
this binder material, and they start with different base grades. So there's a whole process in it,
Right.
and that's the reason why we have to have 4 loads, a minimum of 4 loads, is because that's the process of
And they
them.
make it, and they test it, and they make it, and they adjust it,
Yep.
and they test it until it's right, and then they can say, okay, we've got this batch for this material, this base material, and this product we're using, and we've got to kind of figure it out. You change the base grade, you change the formulation,
Right.
and some base grades work better than others, but we're more buying the HPG as a binder, but that's up to the suppliers to figure out what they can use and how they're going to get there. So, that's a good.
That's one of the questions
that's a-
that they were asked.
Yep.
Another question, this came from a producer, is when we talk about pump sizes,
Mm-hmm.
what's the minimum size of, for your discharge pump or
Mm-hmm.
your unloading pump and your pump throughout your asphalt system? And the answer is 2.5,
to
3
yeah,
inches.
Bigger is better.
So the older plants, and this came out of one of the
Yep.
PIQ meetings,
Yep.
the guy says, well, I got an older plant, I only have a 2-inch pump. And
Probably not going to work.
it's not probably going to work.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have a huge expense to be able to do this.
Repipe.
So if,
Yeah.
if we're not only from TxDOT standpoint, but from a contractor standpoint, again, it can work or will work if we do everything per these notes and
Yeah.
per these
Yeah.
animals
Yeah.
here.
And
So-
don't feel, if you need to reach out, and
And it's not another question was in heavy duty intersections. So
Yeah.
we were talking about an intersection that's rutting,
Yeah.
and district engineer said, "Hey, this would be great in this intersection."
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's going to be great in that intersection, but that's a limited amount of area,
Yep.
and you're going to spend a lot of money in that limited amount of area.
but it beats doing something else.
But
in
it
there.
beats doing something
Some
else,
other material.
or have several of those areas,
Yeah.
and be able to run each area, for one night.
Yeah, through the Asphalt Pavement Quality Initiative, there's an intersection working group right now that
There you
I'm
go.
working on or serving on, and we're looking at that idea, is to defining the scope of is it a new intersection, is it a rehab, how long do we go, how deep do we go, how do we fix this, and so, please feel to reach out if you want some information on that. We've got people from a number of different divisions and districts involved in that, and a number of contractors on that as well. We're still kind of walking through the process right now, but we just had a meeting a week or so ago, and we're meeting every month now to try to make some
Good,
progress
good,
with
good,
that. So, what else we got? We're about out of time here.
Yeah, no, that's all I had on. And again, we're going to continue to talk about this at our partners. At our partners.
PIQs, annual
PIQs. I got Lubbock coming up next, and I got Paris, and also got Austin. And we're doing small working groups also.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so we just met again in FAR. We just had our meeting in FAR. Had a great meeting. And probably going to have a small working group in FAR.
Good.
To where the contractors and TxDOT can discuss back and forth. Later on this month, 28th, I think, we have our small working group in San Antonio.
Okay.
So, the San Antonio district says, let's get our small working group. Let's discuss some of the issues or success stories that we have, and let's have more success,
Yeah.
out in the field, and let's share what we know, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yep.
Share what we know, And I think that's what overall in our industry, I don't think we do that enough. I don't think we share our, the stuff that makes us more
Our
success.
successes.
Yeah,
We talk about our failures a lot, but we need to talk more
We
about our
do.
successes.
We talk
as
about our
build up.
success, and we have some.
So that's just a note for anybody that's out, any of the districts that are out there that weren't named here. If you have some issues you'd like to work on, TXAPA is willing to form a smaller group than a 50-person PIQ meeting of just sitting down and kind of working through some issues and coming up with some, getting to hear both sides of the story, as you're developing some answers to that. And so please reach out if you want to reach out to Chuck or Harold or anybody at TXAPA. You reach out to me, I'm going to forward it to them because I'm working on other stuff now. But we've got some new people on staff, and we'll talk about that in the future here. And so we've got a lot of stuff happening at TXAPA.
Great.
As we go. So that's all the time we got for today. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, Jim. Thank you for letting me come in here and discuss the HPG.
Sitting with me.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
I hope you find some value with this. Download this sheet, get this sheet, make copies of it. Christmas presents, Valentine's Day, Father's Day's coming up.
There you go.
Get it out there for everybody to see. So that's all we got for today. Again, these programs are, delivered on the third Thursday at 3, but also the next day you can find them on TXAPA's YouTube site. Just Google TXAPA or go to YouTube and type in TXAPA. We have a playlist there every day. Like, subscribe, and share for that. We appreciate that. And then you can also find these programs in Audible, on Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts. So that's everything we got for today. Thank you so much for coming in and being part of our family today. And we look forward to giving you lots more good information in the future. So forward, everybody. Take care and have a great day.
Thank you now.